What's up, guys? Jason here, Morph, Mixology, Reptiles. Welcome back to the live stream. Before we get started, Martin Exotics, I don't want to hear about it being late. Have you seen what Billy does on his podcast sometimes? Granted, his normally start about 3 hours ago, but I also don't let them go 3 or 4 hours. So I think our guest is going to appreciate that. And I'll tell you, so am I, because I have been up since 3 o'clock this morning, got a nice early morning overtime today. So I'm already smoked, but we're here. For those of you that have not been following along, I have been watching Herbert make damn sure that as the show sponsor, he was not only here first, but first through third, and starting to get a little rowdy with Black Smoke Reptiles before everybody got here. So as always, I appreciate everybody being in here early and the support. Let me go ahead and add our little show banner down here. And for those that somehow missed the thumbnail, I have to do the absolute cringiest, most cliche intro and say, the doctor is in. Mr. Bill Stegal, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Jason, thanks for having me, man. It's quite the intro.
For that matter, what's up, Doc? I'm sure that's the first time you've ever heard.
Is it too early to say that's all, folks?
Well, I mean, I had Brian Cusco and Garrett Hartle on here together once, and I pushed Brian to the point where he literally got up and left. So,
that's hard to do.
Yeah, no doubt. I have noticed, though, and Brian was completely correct, with the exception of Chris and Kristen Graham, because there are a couple that was still on one screen in that. It seems that my format here and just, I guess, my interview style, if you call it that, does not work for more than one guest, especially more than one guest with dramatically different personalities.
Gotcha.
So I think that was part. Yeah, I think that was part of the issue. Was I don't know. I don't know if comfortable is the right term, but I feel like I'm maybe a little more comfortable with Garrett in like back and forth than I am with Brian. And so it almost felt like we were focusing on Garrett and the Super Dwarf stuff, and Brian was just sitting there staring off into the abyss. So
yeah.
And he'd already done like 3 other lives that day, so he was smoked anyway.
He was zoning out.
Yeah, definitely. So I try to keep it to a one-on-one, or at least a couple on one, but at least just side by side. It seems to be a little bit easier. But hey, I just I appreciate, before we get started, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and join us out of your busy retirement schedule, right?
Well, yeah, I've been looking forward to doing the show. And yeah, I guess I'm pseudo-retired, second career kind of stuff, which it's been a great transition. It's been 2 full years now where I've been doing the reptiles full time, and just couldn't be happier.
Well, before we go too much, go ahead.
I was going to say it beats, essentially doing 2 full-time jobs, which is what I did for really about the last 2 years of my practice. So
yeah, no doubt. I can imagine. Before we get too much farther into it, I know, first of all, how are you guys doing since the apocalypse down there?
We were super lucky. I moved into a new place after I retired, a place that was a little closer to where my wife worked, and we built a facility here. And one of the things that I did was put in a generator, kind of a high-end generator. And, that thing, it was 14 months and the thing never kicked on. And I was beginning to wonder, did I waste, $10,000 putting this thing in? And then the snow apocalypse came, and we had temperatures like Texas has never seen before for a record 4 or 5 days. And we lost power like, almost everybody else in the state of Texas. And I sat in my house and froze in the 50s, but my snake room stayed, a beautiful 78 degrees the entire time. So that was super fortunate to have it work. It worked spot on, and we were on rolling electricity. So we would be we'd have electricity for an hour, and then we'd be off for 2 or 3 hours at a time. And that thing just kicked on and kicked off just like clockwork for 4 days. And so super fortunate to have that. I had actually 2 people bring their collections over after the second day because, nobody could stay warm. So I housed about 150 extra snakes here for 2 or 3 days. And, just super fortunate to get through it.
Wow, that's good to hear. We're accustomed to cold up here, obviously, in Montana, but about a week before that happened to you guys, we had serious cold like I've never seen up here. And I've learned that if this is going to be a serious game for me, especially if we move to another state or some more property, whatever, we're going to build a standalone self-contained building with its own power source, like a generator and that too, because the issue we had was it got so cold here at night for about 4 days straight that it was below the minimum operating temperature for my mini split. So it just went into protect and shut off, and I wasn't getting heat out of the wall.
Wow.
And so come to find out that limit is -20, by the way. So,
God.
And so it was so cold here that I posted a picture on Instagram that I was getting. So first of all, I had like a little bit of an air leak around the door that goes outside here. And so it was raining in the room because of the humidity in here. And it was so cold outside that I had standing water hanging from the ceiling in the corner. And luckily, I don't know how it didn't ruin the paint or the sheetrock or whatever.
Sheetrock.
So I ended up going and getting weather seal tape and taping off the door and taping off the vents to the garage because the garage was down to the mid-20s. So it wasn't helping them having the problem either. And I've got this is all like 6-inch walls and R19 batting and everything, and it still wasn't holding it. But it was so cold that I had a small air leak where it was like I was missing some insulation or whatever behind one of these outlets over here that I added, that the outlet was seeping water, and then it was freezing on the front of the outlet inside the snake room. I had ice in the snake room on the outlets.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
how did you not lose animals?
I'll tell you, so the mini split kept going into defrost, and it would come back on for a little bit, and then it would get down to -20 again, and it would shut off and protect or whatever. Luckily, I also run in the winter an oil-filled space heater on a thermostat just as like a supplementary.
Yeah.
Because I probably should have bought one size larger mini split. It's not quite enough in the winter to carry it by itself. So I run the oil-filled heater. So the room never got below about 60, 64, something like that. And all of the racks have belly heat. So everybody was fine. So that was good.
That's good.
I was in part of, my incubator is against an exterior wall and next to the door that goes outside. So I was like, luckily I don't have any eggs in it yet. Well, I do now, but at the time I was like, God, I'm glad there's no eggs in here. And yeah, it was a weird week trying to just manage while we were waiting for it to warm up just enough that the heater would come back on. We never lost power, but
I never anticipated that generator that I had would kick in the winter because of cold. We always lose power in the summer because the air conditioning puts such a drain on the power grids here that we can lose power in the heat of the summer. You have multiple 100+ degree days here, and then we can lose power. But I never, in my wildest dreams, thought we'd lose it because of extreme cold.
Yeah, that was super bizarre. And I mean, all I can say is Al Gore was right about all the global warming. Clearly,
Clearly.
Yeah.
Are we going to get into politics already?
Hey, I'm game because I it would be ignorant of me to say I know or I have a good idea where you stand on a lot of things because I know you and I haven't talked in depth on that stuff. But I'm fairly confident I could probably guess within at least the same ballpark. So, no, So So I know that you moved because when I came and visited you, 2 or 3 years ago, something like that, you were in that brick home.
I was in Arlington.
Yeah, that place was stunning. By the way, that whole neighborhood floored me because I'm just driving up the road, and it looks like nothing. I see a convenience store and just some trees, whatever. And my thing says turn right at whatever street, and I turn right, and it just opens up into these like old colonial brick mansions on 1 acre lots. I was like, oh my, I'm in the wrong. Well, he's a doctor. I should have known better. No, that neighborhood was awesome.
Yeah. I essentially, we lived there 20 years, right at 20 years. And so It was a big move for us to move, and we downsized a little bit, got a little bit more in the country, and because, the kids are all out of the house and all that kind of stuff. So I downsized my house, but upsized my snake building.
Well, I mean, priorities, right?
Moving in the right direction.
That's right. My dad's always said he wants a 10,000 square foot garage with a 1,000 square foot house attached to it.
That's I don't exactly have that, but yeah, the proportions are getting better.
He's pretty close because his 2,100 square foot house has a 40 by 45 hanger attached to the front of it. So,
oh wow,
it's he's as close to living in a toy box as you can get to.
Nice.
So
he's probably about my age.
Well, my dad will he turns 60 in June.
Yeah, I'm 56, so we're close.
Yeah. So that makes me feel it's like I got my dad Bill on the show here.
I'm Uncle Bill.
Uncle Bill, there you go. So for those, if by some miracle these people on here don't know who you are or where you came from, I mean, we opened the show saying the doctor was in. So what's your pre-snake background?
Yeah, so I was an anesthesiologist. I practiced for 23 years, all in the Dallas area.
Wow.
And did all my training in Dallas, went to med school in Dallas. So pretty much been Texas, not born here, but been here since early high school years. And so, I practiced anesthesia for 23 good years. And, I came to the reptile game relatively late. I was, I think, 34 years old when I got my first, snake, a normal ball python. And wow. I got that because my son at the time was 9 years old, and he had one in his science classroom, and he wanted to get a snake. And I'd always loved, reptiles and snakes and stuff like that. But my parents would never let me keep a snake in the house. So when he said he wanted to get one, we talked mom into it, and we were off to the races.
That's awesome. So I have to ask because my wife and I are on, a lot of the people watching notes I've mentioned before, we're on the Dave Ramsey journey, getting out of debt and trying to get square in the world in that. So did you come out of med school with a boatload of student debt like every other doctor?
I was super lucky because I went through, I went through med school 30 years ago. And at that time, you could get out of medical school if you lived reasonably, which meant you still lived at the poverty level. But if you lived reasonably, I think I came out with maybe $70,000 in debt. The guys coming out,
that's nothing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was med school. I did have a wife that was working. She made an exorbitant salary as a public school teacher. So, we lived on her $22,000 a year. And, but I was super lucky because I came through at a time when it was still relatively cheap, to get through med school. The guys coming out now, if they just do, the basics in a public med school and not going to Yale or Harvard, these guys are coming out $300 in debt.
You could spend $500,000 on anesthesia school without even trying. It's crazy.
If you got to pay for your own college, and if you have to or choose to go to a private schools instead of the public stuff, all of my schooling was public. So, about half the price, but still you can come out, and it's a real decision, economic decision now for somebody to go to medical school if they have to pay for it. In other words,
no doubt.
Mom and dad aren't paying for it, or they don't get in the military or scholarships, undergrad. It's a real economic decision now.
Yeah, that's one. The military is obviously something that we're pro as a pipeline here in our family, in that, and when we get to this process, the debt process, now we're going to start the college funds for our kids at least have a fighting chance, because that's not something that I had access to, but I never really took advantage of myself, and my wife certainly didn't have access to it, and we're paying for that now, of course. But one of the programs I've heard about, I don't really, because I'm not a med student, obviously, but I've heard about the MD, PhD programs that they do a lot of times at schools. I understand they're exceptionally difficult to get into, but effectively you become an employee of the university and they pay for your med school.
I think each university has, set up differently. And I'm not real, my med school offered that program. There were MD, PhDs in my class. But you're absolutely right. It is exceedingly difficult to get into that program. And it's not like medical school for me was 4 years. I think it's 6 years for those guys. And at least where I went to school, I don't believe the university paid for that. I think they had to pay for that. But wow. I'm sure there's different scenarios.
So what in your 20, you said 23 years?
I practiced 23 years.
So what would you say in your 23 years of practice was your most rewarding event that you were a part of?
Man, there's so many. I mean, I did a lot of labor and delivery. So maybe 3 times a month I'd be on the obstetric unit, and I'd be doing the anesthesia for just regular labor, vaginal deliveries, and then we'd also do the anesthetic for C-sections. And I think it's pretty safe to say, I saved more than a handful of lives on that unit. Young mothers and babies that needed, one of those scenarios: get the baby out now, or both mom and baby are going to be dead, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and you get up there and your adrenaline's beating, your heart's just going a million times a minute. You've had an hour of sleep in the last 20 hours, and then it's life or death, literally, right there for about 10 minutes. And so a lot of times where you just kind of wake up the next day and go, God, I can't believe that happened. I'm so glad everything worked out. So a lot of rewarding stuff like that.
Yeah, our anesthesiologist at our delivery was fantastic. I wonder, because how do you, as somebody that's done it for a large portion of your life? My dad was in medicine in the military. He's a pilot now, but he referred to it as going clinical, where you get into the scenario and the proverbial shit is hitting the fan, and you have to just set aside your bias, your opinion, your queasy stomach, whatever the case may be, because you got work to do and you have a very finite amount of time to do it. And what was it like when you walked away from that? What did you find it hard to just relax or unwind? Because I feel like that's a very high strung, constantly wound up in career field.
They say, at least in my profession, anesthesiology, it's kind of like being a pilot. There are hours of boredom mixed in with moments of sheer terror.
That's my job too, by the way.
Is that right?
Oh yeah,
because you're air traffic control, right? Yeah. So I mean, you get the idea of that feeling. Yeah. But one of the first things that they teach us, and one of the things that hit home for me is, if you go to what we call like a code, or you go into a critical event, the first pulse you take is your own, right? Okay. You check yourself first, and then you get yourself under control, and then you go and then you do what needs to be done. Because that comes with training. That's why it's such a long process, and it's just hours and hours and hours. Because the first time I was involved in a critical event like that, as a young med student, I literally just stood there frozen. You don't know what to do, where to start, where to even begin. And then over time, over the years, when I wouldn't say that it becomes just circumstance, like you just do it all the time, but you just, you get used to it and you react to it in an appropriate way.
Yeah. And the same to a different degree is true in my field. And it's one of those things where you see people I train controllers now too. And You know, the situation's unfolding, and the problem, much like in your career field, is it doesn't stop. You can't say time out and hang on a second. The airplanes don't quit moving, you know. And so when the situation is unfolding and it's getting ugly quickly, you see people freeze up. They lose their phraseology. They lose their, you know, their checklist, whatever the case may be. But when you get through that point, you also, like you say, you got to check your own pulse. There's been plenty of times where we're standing up there, we're working in a radar facility, and you're getting your ass handed to you, and you have to tap out. You're like, I need some help because I need to make sure I'm not missing something here because I'm getting absolutely killed on it, you know?
Yeah.
And you have to be able to, you have to swallow your pride. I mean, part of the problem with controllers, much like pilots, and I imagine to a lesser extent doctors, is we're all that real hard-headed type A personality. And in the career field, at least in my case, it's very masculine driven in general.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to say, you know, you have to swallow your pride and say, shit, dude, I am getting my butt kicked. I need some help. Like you want to just push through and solve the problem and say, man, that was a killer, but I totally smoked that session. And sometimes you just gotta, like, I can't, dude. I'm way over my head here.
You know, that's so true. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize, though, is that in medicine, a lot of times the worst stuff happens at the worst time of day. So, like, you know, the worst stuff happens at 1 a.m, 2 o'clock in the morning, and there is nobody else there. It is you. You know, and there's no timeouts. There's no, you know, let me call somebody else in here and scramble some thoughts. You know, a lot of times, man, it's just you. And there was a post a couple of days ago. Somebody was asking on there about doctors and some other non-physicians, you know, were contributing to the post, and they were, you know, saying a lot of similar things. And the bottom line was, you know, the difference, you know, nurse practitioner or highly trained nurses, you know, in the vast majority of cases, they always have somebody to go to. There's always somebody else higher in the ladder, you know, well, this is stumped me, or this is a complication. And so they always have somebody else, you know, to kind of, you know, to go to. And a lot of times, you know, in my profession, there was nobody else to go to. You know, it just stops there. And that, you know, that's not always ideal.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I get the feeling just from the tone of how you talk about it that you enjoyed your tenure, at least.
I had an unbelievable practice. You know, I loved what I did for a long time, but I was ready to go towards the end. I mean, I was so thankful that I had something to fall back onto, you know, something that, you know, I really enjoyed, and something that wasn't quite as stressful. And, you know, I just was super, super fortunate, super blessed to be able to, I had worked up enough to where I could, you know, do the reptiles full time. Yeah.
Well, as a side note, I saw Herbert's comment a while back, and I'm gonna steal his thunder.
What did he say?
Because I saw a joke a couple days ago that I think you'll appreciate, wearing with the shirt that you got on. I don't know if you saw or not, but I saw in the news that the lead singer of Disturbed said that he's come out and said he's against getting the COVID vaccine.
I have not seen that.
Well, apparently he's down with the sickness.
Love it.
Listen, I had you baited there for a minute.
Listen, I did get the vaccine, and I was also down with the sickness. I got the J. Yes, I got the J&J. My wife and myself and my 29-year-old son all went down on the Saturday before Easter and got J&J, and we were all three as sick as dogs for 2 days.
Wow.
What did you get?
My wife and I both had Pfizer. The first day, or the first shot, it felt like I got kicked in the arm by a horse. But I mean, that's
arm soreness.
That's typical, right? And I felt, for about 3 days, I felt noticeably tired. Just like like just exhausted. Like I need to take a nap. You know what I mean? More so than normal with a 7-month-old.
I was going to say getting up at 3:30 in the morning.
That's not usual. Oddly enough, that's a COVID event. I'll tell you that story in a minute. But the second one I went in for, same thing, had a little bit of arm pain, but I felt great and I had it at like 8:30 in the morning. And then when I went to bed, it was about 10 o'clock or so that night. It was such a weird sensation because you know when you have the flu, you get those hot sweats, those cold sweats, and it's like you feel like you're freezing and you shiver and shake uncontrollably, but if people touch you're just radiating heat.
Yep.
I had that, but no other symptom whatsoever. So it felt like I had the flu, except my head was crystal clear. I didn't have a scratchy throat. My stomach felt great. I was just freezing, sweating my ass off and radiating heat.
Wow.
And it was that way. It was that way most of the night. And then I woke up the next morning with a wicked headache. And after that, I was fine.
Yeah, we all had really very similar symptoms to that, except we also had headache.
Yeah.
And just the body aches. Just it felt like you had the flu. I felt like I had the flu.
Yeah. It was so in the case of work, my line mate. Real quick and dirty, we all bid days off every year for the year. And so it just so happens you typically end up with a set of days off with one, sometimes two other people. So my line mate called out sick on, was it Saturday? I guess it was. Saturday and then Sunday morning. So I work, the normal rotation for a controller is 5 shifts in 4 days. So you start your week at 2:30 in the afternoon on your whatever your Monday is, and it works its way earlier in the day until on Thursday you go in at 5:30 in the morning till 1:30 in the afternoon, and then back at 10 o'clock that night to work till 6 a.m. onto your Friday.
Gotcha.
So that's a normal rotation. So on this past Saturday, I think it was Saturday called out, and then Sunday is our double, the morning into the mid shift. Sunday morning he called out sick. Didn't think anything of it, right? Get to the mid Sunday night, and he shows up, and he sounds like shit. He looks bad, and he sounds awful, right? And he's like, man, I just feel like crap. It's like, if it wasn't for the mid, I would have called out today too. I'm like, dude, why? Like, we have a boatload of leave. Like, just take the day off. Who cares? So I get off the mid yesterday morning at 6 o'clock, whatever, come home, wake up around 9:30 by midday yesterday, I get a text from him, says, hey man, I just want to let you know I tested positive for COVID.
Oh no.
And I'm like, oh fuck, of course you did. I'm like, at least my wife and I are both vaccinated, so I shouldn't have to worry about it, and it doesn't affect the baby.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, whatever. And so about 3 hours later, I get a message from my supervisor, and he's doing the contact tracing crap because the FAA is all screwed up on how to deal with COVID. They have been for well over a year now. And so he's starting to figure all that out. And basically the idea is if you were in proximity to the person that tested COVID within the range of their symptoms or whatever, then you need to quarantine for 10 or 14 or 73 or whatever, how many days they decide this week, right? So they're going through that process. Well, I had a 5:30 overtime shift today already scheduled. And so I messaged him. I said, hey, well, I mean, that's, of course I'm in proximity with him. Is my line mate. I'm with him every day. It's like, am I still on for tomorrow? He's like, I don't know yet. I'll let you know. I get a call from my facility manager about 6:30 last night. He said, can you come in at 3:30 for your OT? So we'll make it a 10-hour OT instead, because we're going to have to shut the facility down for the mid. It's either going to be down for the whole mid, or if you can come in at 3:30, at least we can make it a shorter period of time. And I was like, sure, why not? And so I get to work this morning at 3:30. I literally opened I was the only person in the entire building. It was kind of eerie, to be honest with you. It's a little bizarre. And so I go in, I get the facility spun up, I recapture our airspace, I talk to all the people all over the country that need to know and that were there, and the whole 9 yards. And effectively is what happened was the flight surgeon just arbitrarily decided, because there has been no guidance on this from the federal government or from the FAA, but just arbitrarily decided that those of us that have been vaccinated, we're safe to stay and work. And everybody else in the facility that's not vaccinated needs to be out on admin leave for 10 days.
Oh my God.
So now a facility that typically runs on 16 to 20 people, generally is what our normal staffing looks like. We have 9 guys to run the entire facility for the next 10 days. So I get punished for getting the vaccine by having to come rescue the facility and work the overtimes and weird schedules, while the people that chose not to or haven't done it yet get to go sit at home and collect a paycheck for 10 days.
That's brutal.
So to make matters worse, because I'm sure you're intimately aware of how consistent the federal government is on all of this, they make that determination this morning. And yet this morning, while I was in the facility talking to the manager, I still have to wear a mask. Please explain that one to me.
Well, I'm surprised you don't have to wear 2 masks.
Yeah, right. No, I want to get just the nose mask.
I'm going to call Fauci as soon as we're done with this show and talk to him.
Yeah, you've probably got an in with him, right?
He's on speed dial. He's number 4.
God, I've been baffled by the way, well, if I'm being honest, I've been baffled by the way everybody has handled all of this from the beginning. But the FAA, I mean, the problem is, as the stuff changes so rapidly, it happens to all of the regular people, all the civilians, right? And because I'm internal inside of a department, inside of the federal government, we are the last to know, which means we're also the last to be released.
Yeah.
And it's just brutal. And then Biden comes out, 3 months ago or whatever it was, and issues the federal mandate of mask wearing to all federal employees and contractors and anyone on federal property. That's me.
That's you. Even though you've been.
And yet he didn't wear one 2 hours later in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And as far as I'm aware, I mean, I'm just a product of the American public school system. Last I checked, the White House is federal property.
Yeah, it is.
So well,
I was super fortunate, to get out of medicine when I did. I got out literally, maybe, I guess it was a little over a year before COVID hit.
Oh, I bet it would have been weird.
So many of my partners, man, have just go, God, I can't believe you got out when you did. It's been tough on a lot of people.
So if you're comfortable talking about it from a doctor's perspective, somebody that spent their life in medicine, what's your take on the last 15 months?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly not an infectious disease expert, so I'm really.
No, you have common sense, I'm sure.
I mean, I've got common sense. I think that a lot has been learned from COVID, so I don't try to hold people to information that was garnished 18 months ago. I mean, things need to change as more information becomes available, and then you make the best decision at the time with the information that you have. But it seems really strange that this virus in a lot of ways acts different than a lot of viruses, but the bottom line is it's a virus, like a lot of the other stuff that we've come across. And so I get confused a lot of times when, people are still saying, that if you've been vaccinated after 2 weeks, then it's okay for you to gather with, it's okay to air travel. It's okay to gather with your friends, but you still need to be wearing a mask. And just stuff like that to me, just again, I'm no infectious disease doctor, but on a common sense aspect, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. I certainly follow, I'm more of a fan of let's protect the people that need to be protected, like the elderly and the people that, have pre-existing diseases, and they're, a lot more likely to die of this disease than you or I. Let's protect those people, but the rest of the
Absolutely.
people, especially as more people get vaccinated, we gotta move on with our lives, because I'm telling you, my wife's a school counselor in an elementary school,
Oh,
and this
geez.
stuff hasn't come out yet because there's not been enough time. But I'm telling you, the data on these kids,
Yeah.
even elementary school, my wife has been a teacher and a counselor for almost 30 years. She has seen more suicidal ideations in the last 6 months than she has seen in her entire 30-year practice. And this is
Yeah.
fifth and sixth graders. So, this disease is taking a toll in a lot of ways, that other than just the virus. And so I think we need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, it's sad. I agree with you that from the get go, it should have been focused on protecting those that truly needed it. I mean, there's plenty of people in this country that don't believe in vaccines in general,
Yeah.
but yet the herd immunity that we have gotten to with those that do have vaccines and those that carry antibodies and those that get sick from stuff or whatever are still protecting those people
Keeps
that
them
don't believe.
protected. That's right. Keeps them protected.
So you're not seeing people drop dead of measles and mumps and rubella and that every day because they're not vaccinated for it. It's because they don't need to be because of the herd immunity. So I've lobbied from the beginning. You don't lock down 100% of the population of a country and ruin the economy to protect 15 or 20% of its populace.
Or less.
Or less. That's asinine.
3% of the population.
Yeah. So if you'd have taken that chunk of people and quarantine them, isolate them, protect them. I mean, don't just shove them in a box and lock the door, but protect them to the level we can, while the rest of us, A, keep the economy alive, and B, continue to pass around. Yeah, a couple of us are going to get sick. The likelihood of any of us dying from it is exceedingly low. And get the herd immunity started. We could have been through the herd immunity thing in less than a year, and then they can come back out safely when the vaccine starts to become more popular or readily available for those that need it. And it probably would have been. I mean, the problem is you can't prove a negative, and you can't prove something that's unprovable. And so I can say it probably would have been far less detrimental had we done it that way. But there's no way to prove that.
Yeah, there's no way to prove it.
And sadly, the narrative says, oh, so you're saying just let everybody run around willy-nilly passing it like a spring break, yeah, you're crazy or whatever. So that part was frustrating for me, but the one you're talking about, the kids, and I honestly think that it's sad because, and I'm glad my kids, or my daughter is as young as she is, because she'll never know otherwise,
Yeah.
But the ones that are truly, I think, in the next decade that we're going to see brought to light that were adversely affected by everything that's happened in the last year, we're going to be the kids. It's so sad, and you're not going to know it because we immediately, because they don't have the capacity to understand what's going on. All they know is something's going on. People are dying, and we just took them away from all of their friends and structure and school and classes and stuff that they like, and school, sports, and everything else, and locked them in their house in front of a computer for 10 months.
What a lot of people don't know is that for a lot of kids, the 7 hours that they're in school are the safest 7 hours of their day. They go home to, situations where maybe the food isn't adequate or the parenting supervision isn't adequate. So many cases of literally third graders taking care of kindergartners at their apartment while mom and dad are both at work now. I mean, that's just terrible.
Yeah.
It's just so much of that stuff is going on, and it's just gonna, over the next year, as they're able to get this data out there, you're going to see a horrible numbers as far as child abuse, suicide, mental health issues in kids. You're going to see it that it's skyrocketed.
Yeah, and it has in all age groups. My next door neighbor is a local police officer, and they've seen a huge uptick in domestics in that too. Same problem. I mean, it's sad to say it this way, but it's a reality that a bunch of people, once they were forced to spend 24/7 with their significant other, realized they didn't like them. You know, and
there's a lot of
it's sad, but it's the reality. But I got to shout out Martin's Exotics through a super chat out there. Appreciate it. It says, love this live. Love you, Jason. Being military myself, I have my beliefs and
I'm
anti all of it. It's government control tactic, not a sheep. You know, and he's got another point further down here talking about government wants microchips and it's in Revelations and whatnot. And look, man, I respect and appreciate everybody's beliefs, but I'm not a believer in that case. I'm not a person of faith. I never have been. It's just my brain's not wired for that. I'm too hard-headed, I think. But I don't think that any of this has anything to do with faith. And it's sad. There's a lot of people that have are trying to connect what has happened over the last 18 months to stuff in scripture. And that's all fine and well. I mean, whatever you have to do to make it through the day. But sadly, COVID is not the problem. COVID was never an issue other than dealing with it on a national scale of some kind of medical thing that we need to solve and manage. COVID became a political weapon. And I think Hollywood could not write a better script for this to happen right in the middle of an election year of one of the most contentious presidents of all time.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know,
no doubt. It's like, you know, you look at like all of the millions of things could happen, like that accidental shooting, you know, of that 20-year-old black kid yesterday,
Yep.
10 miles from where they're having, you know, the child trial. What are the odds of that happening?
Talk about horrendous timing.
The worst time and the worst place that could only in 2020, 2021 can that shit happen. You can't, you know, you just can't make that shit up. I mean, it's just beyond belief that would actually happen, where it happened, and when it happened.
Yeah, and you know damn good and well that if by some screwed up outcome of the justice system that Derek Chauvin doesn't get absolutely eviscerated, this country is going to burn again. And so all this has done is that accidental shooting, and then I can't remember where it was, but the Army lieutenant, the black guy that was overpowered in his car because he wasn't complying, whatever, with the couple days, right around the same time. All that's done has stoked the fire. It's just got it started. So if in 2 weeks they come out and they don't hand this guy the death penalty or whatever, they're already we just finally got to where people have kind of simmered and like we're all just watching at the moment. And I watched last year. Last year was the fastest, longest year of my entire life.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like you look back and you're like, holy crap, it's already over like that. Look at it now. It's already almost May, right?
Yeah.
But yet it felt like we were in it forever.
Yeah. And it still does.
Yeah. You know, and then you just watch, you open your news app one morning and, now it's murder hornets. And now it's riots here. And now it's this. And like, Jesus Christ, like, can we just take a freaking break? Like, can stop the riot. I want to get off. Like,
crazy times.
Yeah. Who knows, man? It's been mad. I got to say, and I've talked to a few people about this. I have the utmost respect for people that acknowledge mental illness and things going on in their lives and seek help for it. And that I personally, and I might just be boiling over and I'll explode at some point, I'm sure. But I personally believe I'm too hard-headed to be depressed or to have that kind of stuff. That's just the way I'm wired. I always have been. I push it aside because I got a job to do, kind of thing, you know. But I sat down last year, probably around May, something like that, and I called. It was right around the time of the George Floyd deal and then watching what was going on in Minneapolis and Portland and Seattle, right? And I've got plenty of friends that are cops and whatnot. And I called my dad and I was like, I'm just sad. Like my heart hurts and I don't know how to feel anymore.
Yeah.
You know, because you're on one hand, I'm trying to wrap my brain around how the hell the government is handling this pandemic that's going on and the 8 to 17 correlations that they're doing with common sense and logic and this and lockdown and mask and not and whatever, right? And on the other hand, I'm watching the country literally burn itself to the ground out of anger and taking it out on people that had nothing to do with the situation and are not involved and, you know, are for lack of better terms, all the, you know, the black people that were burning down businesses of black, you know, that were owned by black people because they were pissed and like just I literally was at a loss for words and I had never felt emotion like that in my entire life because I compartmentalized it and just put it aside. And I had to take a couple of days. I'm just like, fuck, I don't even know what to feel about what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah, it's because you're young enough that you didn't experience, and I'm even young enough that I didn't experience all the race riots in the 60s and Vietnam and, you know, all that stuff. All this stuff is not new to this country. This stuff has happened before, but with expanded media coverage and now even worse, social media,
no doubt,
magnifies it. You know, just like a magnifier magnifies the sunlight and just burns. You know, it can just set fires. And so, I don't think what we're experiencing is any different than what this country's experienced before. I just think, unfortunately, social media and the media has made it worse.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I asked my grandmother, she's 80, 87, 89, something like that, whatever. And I asked her one day last year, I said, Grandma, in your lifetime, have you ever seen this country look like this? And she said, no, not even close.
Mm.
You know, and you're probably right on the hurdles in that the country has been through and the atrocities and, you know, race relations obviously has always been a thing. And, you know, the gay rights movement in the early 2000s, I was in high school when all that stuff started to really boil over and, you know, and that kind of thing. But she said, I've never seen it look like it does right now. The way that it is so dramatically divided and everybody is at each other's throats about something or nothing all at once, and they don't even know why anymore. Yeah. And I think you hit on it. I wholeheartedly believe 2020 that that Facebook and Twitter are absolutely, if there was some way that you could hold them criminally culpable, I absolutely think that Facebook and Twitter are culpable for what 2020 looked like.
You know, you have to go back and, you know, you can ask your grandmother this, but even when I was a little kid, all right, no social media, right? So no Facebook, Instagram. You had the news, but you had the news for 2 hours a day. You had the 6 o'clock news and you had the 10 or 11 o'clock news.
11 o'clock, yeah.
So you had 1 hour of news and then boom, it was the Tonight Show. And, you know, turn that shit off and you got an hour, or if you watched both news broadcasts, you got 2 hours of news every day. Now it's 24/7.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that just, you know, like I said, I don't mean to argue with the grandma, but I think things have been just as bad in this country. But it's just magnified now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have said throughout this whole ordeal, I guess to lend credence to the people that think that it's about control and government oversight and whatever else you want to believe in. What I mean in the sense of it being like a political weapon is, I mean, you know, in medicine, the flu death toll is just a guess because most people don't even go to the hospital for the flu. So we don't really have an accurate number of that. heart attacks and cancers and that are still the leading causes of death in the country, even after COVID. I saw that stat last week. I thought it was pretty interesting. COVID was third overall still, even with as many misreported cases or something else with comorbidities. And it also said in there that 78% or whatever it was of all those listed at least 2 comorbidities. But the difference with all of this since COVID started is we've never had a 24/7 live, up-to-date death counter that anybody can source anytime from anywhere.
Yeah, it's true. You can literally watch it, like the national debt. You can just watch those numbers roll every minute.
Yeah, and Dave Ramsey is the first place I heard it. He referred to it as fear porn. Like the society is addicted to the fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. That kind of hit me upside the head a while back. I was like, oh, gross, and you start to realize it because every channel you turn to has got the counter on it. And so I'm certain that didn't help with people's mental being and everything else for that matter. So, but no.
There should be more reptile podcasts and less network news.
Yeah, there you go. I agree with you. No, I like to believe that we're getting there, whatever there looks like. I'm not naive enough to think that it's ever going to look like 2019, but I'd like to see some resemblance of quote unquote normal, but I guess normal in our world is breeding snakes, which is which is a really weird sentence when you think about it.
It's so again, COVID has been so weird, with the whole snake thing. I was never busier than the peak of COVID selling reptiles. It's just crazy.
So
just crazy.
Are your sales up from what you noticed?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, I literally, I've literally been sold out of stuff for 3 months. I mean, I'm just waiting for this stuff to, eggs to lay and stuff to hatch now, so I can keep selling. I literally sold out for 3 months. Never did a show. Never did a show. Just 500 snakes gone in a year, or less than a year.
Yeah, Chris Eaton from Snakes in the Fat Man, he says it all the time, and everybody that he's interviewed over the last year has said that kind of across the board, everybody's showing like a 40-50% uptick in sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been insane. I still have a handful left. They're actually on their way to Arlington for the show.
Nice.
So if you see my stuff down on Josh's table, just buy it for me so I don't have to get it back.
Then I'll have
he's got my
sell.
scaleless down there too, so that'll be pretty cool.
What is it? Scaleless what?
Pastel scaleless possible Enchi ball python. She's like 400 grams now, something like that.
Very cool.
Yeah, she's super rad. I mean, she is technically for sale, but sadly, the state of that project, I don't think many people are going to pay what I know she's actually worth. And since I've only got the one, and I don't think that her mom's going to go this year, I'm not really worried if she sells or not.
Yeah.
Because I certainly wouldn't go buy one, and that was my first. So if I just keep her as a cool pet, so be it. And assuming that somebody proves them to be viable, then I'm already a year ahead on the idea. So
yeah, I think you're right.
I'll happily try it.
I think you're right. I think a lot of people want to make them. I don't think a lot of people want to buy them. Yeah,
that's fair. I do see my scaleless head stuff sell pretty well in general.
Mine does too.
And I like, I tell people, despite what you think about the scaleless project, I think if you're concerned about it, treat it just like we all do with spider and champagne and that kind of thing, and just don't deliberately breed for a super, because there's no doubt that the scaleless head it's a really cool gene by itself.
Yeah, it is.
It adds some wonkiness to patterns. It's a color intensifier. Like, it does some really cool stuff. So just don't breed for a super if you don't want, but take advantage of what it's doing to all the other stuff.
I produced quite a few scaleless head albino and candinos this last year, and that stuff looks wicked. The heads on those things, I mean, it's so pronounced. The scaleless and those light colored animals are so pronounced. They just look amazing. So yeah, I haven't had any trouble selling those.
Yeah, the scaleless head pied that I made 3 of them this year. The one that I kept is arguably one of the nicest pieds I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and he's got 2 saddles next to each other that are completely different shades, totally different.
Right?
They're super cool looking.
Yeah,
you know,
it's awesome. Yeah,
and
I'm actually breeding on the project.
Yeah, and I'm breeding this year. So I didn't breed. I bred for the visual. But like I said, I don't think she's going to go. My male that I got from Josh originally, he tends to throw some of the nicest pastel stuff I've seen by far. I just sold an 800-gram pastel Enchi that came out of my first clutch that I'd ever produced, and I had held her back, and I ended up getting rid of her anyway. And at 800 grams was still one of the best color tone and brightest pastel Enchis I've seen. And everything that I've made that has pastel in it from that male looks killer. And so I put him to my pinstripe ultramel this year.
Nice.
So he's pastel Enchi scaleless head. So I'll have, lemon blast and Enchi and whatnot, scaleless heads that are 100% head ultramel. And for 2 reasons. One, I want to see scaleless head in the ultramel to see if we can intensify some of those colors. But I'm probably going to breed for the scaleless ultramel, even if it's just to do it once to put one in my collection, because that animal has got to be electric.
You work with ultramel. I work with candy.
I told you I told you I wanted a pure candy this year because I have lavender albino as well, and so I figure, as far as I'm concerned, I've got lavender. I don't need albino. I don't want to worry about trying to get them confused and mixed up or whatever. But if I was going to go in different T negative albino, I think I want to go candy, either candy or toffee. But I think I want to go pure candy because I like the colors in it better.
I think candy and toffee are the same thing.
Do you really?
Yeah, I think that's been pretty much. I think most people think that that's true now. Candy and toffee are the same. Kind of like either way. Kind of like banana and coral glow. I think they came in at the same time, just through different people.
It's interesting to me that they're, from a scientific perspective, I'm certainly no biologist, but it's interesting to me that there can be multiple different T negative albinos that can work together on the allele like Candino does, but are different, yet we can have 4 different variations of xanthiform and xanthic, and none of them are compatible. How is that possible?
But you have to look at also that, like, lavender albino and albino are not compatible. Lavender albino and candy or Candino not compatible. So
and obviously all the T negs with the T positive stuff like ultramel and burgundy and that kind of stuff aren't either.
Right.
So it's what would a lavender ultramel look like?
I don't know. I don't think it's ever been. I don't ever think it's been done, has it?
Which color would win in that?
I myself and a friend of mine tried to produce, or we actually did produce, the first super cinnamon Candino, looking for an all purple snake, but it ended up being all yellow.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I'm working towards. I think the lavender Suma was where I was headed for that idea.
To get like an all purple.
Yeah. Well, I want to do Suma banana pieds as well. Because I want to see if that will draw the purples out of the banana, because we've already seen the super cinnamon banana and it's just brown. It's kind of a sand color.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder if a Suma lavender would do it. So the problem,
I don't know. I don't work with either of those genes.
Yeah, the problem with lavender is when you add the dark gene stuff to it, like mahogany, blackhead, black pastel, that kind of stuff, is it takes the purples away and intensifies it as white and makes the oranges much brighter.
Mm.
So you look at the whites will eventually all turn purple in general, from what I've seen. But you look at Justin made a leopard blackhead lav, and it looks insane as a baby because it has that same kind of contrast as like a black pastel albino does, where it's like super bright oranges and stark white. And then that white starts to fade into that lavender color. But I don't know if, I imagine in a lavender that Suma would be overpowering enough in the pattern department that you wouldn't have any of the orange or yellow left. You would think.
I don't know. All I can do is compare it to, I've produced pure candy cinnamon and pure candy black pastels, and they're dark. They're dark. They're darker than normal candy.
Yeah, because I saw your clutch, and I told you I wanted a pewter candy female.
Yeah. Pewter candies. I've got a male that's breeding now, and they're pretty light because of the pastel. They're not nearly as dark as like a cinnamon candy or a black pastel candy. The pewter candies lighten up. They're incredible.
But I'd love to take like a pewter or a cinnamon candy and work like my red stripe GHI male through it, something like that, and make some really cool heads so you can start stacking really cool dark and pattern genes on top of it.
There's so much candy just has not been explored enough yet with all that stuff that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And Ultramel hasn't really either.
And Ultramel's taken off right now. The prices of Ultramel are through the roof.
Are they?
At the moment. I sold cinnamon pinstripe Ultramels last year for, I think they were $700 for females, $750 for females, something like that.
Yeah.
And I heard the other day that a butter pin Ultramel female sold for $1,200. Because Ultramel just got hot all of a sudden.
I'm not surprised, man. I think the whole market has just gotten hot.
I hope so, man. I need to buy another rack.
I increase prices on my bells. I produce a shit ton of just blue-eyed Lucies every year. I've got 30 proven breeder female, either blue-eyed Lucies, Mojaves, or Lessers. So I produce about 60 or between 60 and 80 blue-eyed Lucies a year. And this last year, exactly. Yeah. And this last year I increased the prices on them, and it's the only ball python that I have a waiting list. I got a waiting list of 10 people for blue-eyed Lucies this year.
Really? God, it's such an easy combo too. How funny!
I know it should be $200.
Fair, I'm breeding for super fires for the 4th year in a row, and I always sell out of my super fires. Without question. They're usually the first to go. The super fire and the dragonfly, which are coming out of that same clutch. And that girl always lays 9 or 10 eggs, and I usually end up with like 3 or 4 super fires, 3 or 4 dragonflies, and fire or something, and they're all gone immediately.
White snakes and pieds.
Yep.
You just can't produce enough of them.
And clowns. I'm still kicking myself. Chris Sexton's in the chat. I'm still kicking myself for selling the GHI clown female I made this year. She was a killer. Yeah, but it's sitting right here.
There you go.
That's the problem.
That's how you have
to buy another one.
Absolutely.
So obviously you do some ball python stuff, but everybody knows you as, ironically, the sickness guy.
Being a doctor, there was no accident in naming that animal that.
No, of course not. Well, the correct me if I'm wrong, but the sickness produced the plague, right?
Yes.
And then have you produced the COVID yet? And when does the vaccine come?
I wouldn't name anything vaccine because that's not a disease state, and it's too early to name it COVID.
It's kind of in poor taste.
kind of in poor taste. So I've not named anything COVID, but I do have the flu. I have contagion. I have outbreak. Plague. That's been fun. It's just been a fun gimmicky thing more than anything else. But I named the animal the original green tree that I produced, the Sickness. One, because I love Disturbed. I'm a big Disturbed fan. And when that thing was hatched, most of the comments were like, that thing is sick. That thing is just sick. And so that's what I named it.
So let me ask you, because when I was there, I got schooled on green trees, and I still have no idea what I'm looking at. But I saw the Sickness when I was there, and that it's mind blowing what that is actually capable of. And you told me that, if I understand correctly, there are no morphs. There are no, you're not making a banana calico GHI green tree, but there are designer lines, right?
There's one morph, and it's albino. That's the only recessive trait in green trees that's ever been discovered. So there is an albino, but the rest is no. In fact, there's not even. I don't even know if there's any in existence on the planet right now. There's a guy named Marshall Mendez that has produced albinos, and in fact, he has one right now. The problem is he just hasn't been able to get him up to adult. He's had just trouble getting him established, but yeah, there is an albino morph in green trees, but the rest of the stuff is
I'll have
just
to look that up. That's gotta look nuts.
Well, it looks nuts because it's it was born a red baby, so you think, well, there's no way that can be albino, but it's got a pink tongue and it's got some changes in its pupil that can identify it as an albino.
Oh, that's weird.
So yeah, that's pretty weird.
So when you put, I don't know if this is possible because I don't remember. Obviously, I'm sure your collection looks vastly different than it did when I saw it. But when you put, say, the Sickness, which is black, right?
Right.
With its confetti that it's got all over it, it looks like sprinkles.
Yeah. Black and
you put
blue in there.
You put that to that really bright blue and white female that you've got, right?
Yeah. That's the pairing that I did.
So when you do that, are you looking for something in particular? Is there something you're anticipating that to make?
Well, when you breed green trees, there's really three or four different traits you're looking for: high yellow, high blue, high black, or then what they call kind of a confetti or hodgepodge of just weird, different, almost pixelated appearance, like called a calico. And so when I bred those two, I was either looking for high blue or high black or both. And it turns out that the mother that was very high blue, her blue wasn't genetic. In other words, none of the offspring, when they went through their color change, became super high blue like she is. But a lot of the animals did become high black, like the Sickness is. So his melanism or his blackness was more genetic. And that didn't surprise me because his father had some melanism, not nearly as much as him. So to answer your question, I was looking for high blue or high black.
Weird. So what had her color been genetic? What would the combination look like?
I think the babies would have had more blue. I think they would have been a combination. They would have just had more blue in them. If she would have been like a high blue line animal, in other words, blue that's been passed on generation from generation, I think she was just kind of a fluke out of her. She was an imported animal. So she came in from a Bushmaster farm, and she was a locality animal. And most of the animals that she would be hanging around with in Indonesia would be green, and she just happens to be blue. And that blue was not transferred genetically into her babies.
So are there specific locales and like designer lines? Like, are you chondro guys like the Morelia people that if you so much as dare to breed a Madame Blueberry Coastal with anything other than a pure Coastal, you're sacrilegious. Like, is it that strict?
No, in fact, it's really the opposite, which is what attracted me to green trees, because I've always been kind of a Frankenstein. Like, I was big into carpets for a long time, long before I got into green trees. And there's a big percentage of the carpet people that are against breeding jungle carpets to coastal carpets, for example, because I love the Jaguar trait. Jaguar trait is only in coastal carpets, but I bred it in jungle carpets because jungle jags look better than coastal jags.
Agreed.
But a lot of the purists in the carpet world were totally against that, and there's not that kind of feedback in the green tree world. There's a lot of people that like pure locality types, and but we just kind of coexist. Some people like pure locality types, and other people like designers, which is just a fancy word for saying crosses or mutts. And as over the last couple of years, the green tree world has kind of got shaken because they've now taxonomy have put them into different subspecies. And so now a lot of people say, oh, well, you've been crossing these for years all along. You just didn't know it,
Yeah.
So
I like Chad's comment. He said, if the black and blue would have worked, you'd had to have named it a bruise.
the bruise, exactly. See, that's I would have named it. I would have named it hematoma.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So one of the things I noticed when I was down there, obviously you get the neos out, and the interesting thing you showed me, because you had some that were hatching while I was there, was you said when they come out of the egg, they go right to the perch, like they know that's where they need to be naturally, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
When they come out, correct me if I'm wrong, they only come out either red or yellow, correct?
That's correct.
Does that mean anything?
Yeah, it means a lot.
Okay.
Because, for instance, if you're trying to go for high blue or high black, you're much more likely to get that phenotype out of a red baby versus a yellow baby.
Is it because it's already darker melanin to begin with?
That's unknown. It's unknown. Okay. Either that or the founding fathers of green trees, people like Trooper Walsh, decided to work with red babies instead of yellow, and so they selectively bred red babies, and they got these blue and black characteristics. If they would have chosen to work with yellow babies and in the 70s bred those, maybe black and blue would come out of those. So there's a couple different school of thoughts. I think most people think that red animals are more likely to produce high blue, high black. Yellow animals, high yellow animals can come from red babies also. So
okay.
That's why, price-wise, the red babies are tend to be more expensive than yellow babies, even though I think the yellow babies look as good or better than the red babies.
I think the yellow ones are cuter. The red ones look kind of scary. They have like that little cross in their eyes and everything too, and it's like it just look weird.
They all look awesome to me. I love them all.
And then when you go to sell them, obviously if you do a pairing like the sickness to that blue line or whatever, I'm sure you're looking for some kind of outcome that you likely will keep back as well.
Yeah.
So do you have to? Is there like for lack of better terms, a waiting period before they're even eligible to sell because you have to wait for that octogenic change to start?
You can, or you can choose to sell them before it starts, and it's a gamble on both ends. Wing it. It's a gamble for the seller, and it's a gamble for the buyer. If you choose to buy them or sell them before they started their change, it's a gamble. There's some things you can look for, and I've done it both ways. I sell a lot of stuff before it's started to change, and then I sell stuff, during its change.
How long does that take?
It depends, but some of them can start to change as early as, 10 months old, and others won't start to
Wow.
change until they're 2.
Oh, so it could be a long time.
It can be a long time.
Interesting. Can you tell on a Neo? Are they like ball pythons in the sense that everyone is like a fingerprint, that even the pattern is slightly different? There's no two that are identical in that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can tell. Yeah, absolutely. You take a picture and no pattern's the same.
And is there something in stuff that you breed? Is there something you look for in that original? Obviously, you've got 6 red Neos from this pairing, and you look at it. Is there something in there that you're looking for originally?
Yeah, for sure.
If you're going to do, I'm going to keep this and sell them early kind of thing. Is there something you're looking for?
For sure. In the red babies, it's the darker the better, and the less pattern is typically better. It gives you the highest odds of reaching a crazy animal as adulthood. But that is certainly not a hard and fast rule. I let go a baby from that sickness clutch that was not very dark and was heavily patterned, and it turned out to be absolutely crazy.
I remember that.
just totally high degree of melanism.
Yeah.
So it's a gamble. Like I said, it's a gamble for both the seller and the buyer if you buy before they change. The problem is most people won't sell a green tree after it's changed and it goes high blue or high black.
Of course.
So you really your best chance of buying one is to get it unchanged from a good genetic, like 2 high blues bred together, or a blue and a black, or whatever the look that you're going for. Buy that as an unchanged baby, because the breeder is not going to sell it once it changes and it goes crazy.
Well, I think it'd be cool to watch it change too.
It's so cool. It's so cool. Yeah.
I want a green tree at some point purely as a display pet.
A lot of people get them, unlike the balls. A lot of people, have just 1 or 2 green trees. Most people that get a ball python, or a lot of people have I want to breed it, reproduce it, make my own stuff. A lot of people have just 1 or 2 or a few green trees as display animals. And
although I gotta say, between them and the emeralds, their teeth are freaking terrifying. So
the emeralds even more so.
Oh, no doubt.
But we had this conversation, I know, before, and it's one of the reasons that I wanted to do a podcast about green trees is I've never been bitten by a green tree. Never. Yeah, and maybe a baby one time when I'm assist feeding or something. Yeah. But their reputation as being super aggressive or super defensive is just not warranted in the vast majority of captive bred animals. While you get an imported Biak, it's going to try to bite your face off all day and all night long if you put your hand in the cage. Yeah. But a captive bred green tree is, to me, as docile or more docile than a ball python.
Well, I noticed that when you handed me the sickness on the perch, and it said, you got to be somewhat gentle with them. But he said, just hold on to it, let him, and he was totally cool. He just cruised up and came off the perch, and I was blown away because I was expecting those freaking. I knew they're not the same as the emeralds, but I was expecting those teeth, and
you expect them to be defensive, and
no, not at all.
And really, their first go-to is to tuck their head like a ball python. That's they're just the ones that are born in captivity. Like a lot of this stuff now, the blood pythons and stuff like that. The stuff that's a couple generations in captivity is so much different than imported stuff. It's crazy. And green trees are the same way. Super docile.
My Sumatran shorttail was that way. He was very vocal, but he never struck at me when I had him. And he was just a big 15-pound slug, but he was totally fine,
Yeah.
But one of the hardest hitting eaters of anything I've ever.
Oh my God! I've got adult Borneo shorttails, and when they strike that jumbo rat, I would not want my hand to be there in its place, because devastating.
Speaking of which, how'd it go with your female?
It went good. I got her back. It's been a busy day today for me too. Not as busy as your day, but I got her back from the vet today. I've been breeding pythons for 20 years. Ball pythons, carpet pythons, green trees. This is my first year to breed Borneo shorttails, and my second girl to lay got egg bound.
Oh, shit.
First time it's ever happened to me. And so, just did the whole thing, the whole vet thing. And we tried conservative stuff for a few days, and she laid 11 good eggs. The problem is she had 11 left inside of her too.
Oh, shit.
And so I got her back today. He did surgery on her yesterday and everything went great. He got 11 eggs out, couldn't salvage her oviduct. It was pretty shredded, but the other side, her oviduct looks great. So rest her for a year and, back in the rotation.
So you think you will breed her again?
Oh, for sure.
Because I've heard some that say once they egg bind, they're more likely to do it a second time or again. And I've heard a lot of people say that they just personally, once they egg bind, they just shelve them at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a personal decision. I, consulted with my vet about it, and, he said the other oviduct looks super healthy. And so
that's good. Yeah.
No reason, not to.
Okay. This is my naivete of how snakes work. Does that mean that she's likely now to lay half as many eggs? No. Once you fertilize ova, it chooses one oviduct to go down or the other, essentially. Oh, so
okay. She lay the same number of eggs.
Interesting. You're talking about how hard some of them hit. I'll tell you, this Dumerals girl down here at my feet. Yeah. She is an absolute teddy bear. I love this girl to death. She's pushing 7 foot and probably 20 pounds now, something like that. And she's not wild about getting out of her cage. Oddly enough, she is far easier to get out of this 66.5 drawer than she ever was out of her 6 foot enclosure. She hated coming out of the enclosure. She's totally fine coming out of here. She loves it. But when I fed her a big rat yesterday, and I opened the drawer with my 4 foot long freaking hook. Yeah. And I don't feed it to her. If her head's up and ready, like I literally toss the rat at her. If I get it somewhere in the proximity, that's all it needs.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But she this whole freaking rack shakes when she hits it. I would not want to get bit by her because it would hurt something fierce. Man.
I had an emerald several years ago. I got it maybe when it was less than a year old, and she was the most docile, sweetest snake, that I owned. But once she got to be about 3 years old and she got big enough, 3-4 years old, one bite from her, at the time I'm in practice. So if she would have bit me in the hand, that's not like a ball python bite. That's like go to the freaking emergency room and get stitches and all that shit. So I didn't have any problems with her, but I traded her on a green tree just because their teeth are so big and they hit so hard.
You're like, I don't have needles this big at work. Like
I'm telling you, man, you've seen their teeth. They're massive.
Yeah, and they get that picture where they can grab them behind the head and pull them back.
And just push them out.
Nuts. So let me ask you, you're saying that the chondro people aren't nearly as critical about blends in that as the chondro people are, or as the Morelia people are.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they're overjoyed to know that you've got a carpondro to begin with.
See, that's where it starts to get a little bit more muddy. Yeah.
That snake is super cool, by the way. That is probably one of the coolest color and pattern animals I've ever seen. And the fact that it perches is awesome.
It's an incredible animal. It looks like a carpet, but it perches like a green tree. And it's big. It's big too. It's like big like a carpet.
What would you imagine something like that looking like if it was sired by the sickness?
Yeah, I just have no idea. I don't know how much black it would bring into it.
Yeah, could you imagine putting the sickness to say, like I now after a trade and the whole, come to find out my undocumented coastal carpet female was a male, so I wasted 3 years raising her or him. But now I have a documented, so I would probably be shunned from the Morelia family, but I have a documented pure caramel jungle coastal female that I'm raising up now. But could you imagine what the sickness to that would create as a carpondro?
Yeah, it's so. First of all, I have no idea. Secondly, I would totally get ostracized from every member of the carpet and the chondro community if I ever wasted, sickness lineage on a carpet python. So,
or God forbid, crossed out a pure coastal from Eric Burke, which is where she came from originally.
Is that right? EB's my boy.
Or no, not from Eric, from Owen is where she came from originally. So if we cross her out, I'm gonna be in some hot water.
I'll tell you what, if you want to razz Owen, just talk to him about crossing rough scales with stuff.
Well, that's where I'm getting to. I don't know about the crosses, but you and I have talked about this quite a bit, and the roughie is absolutely on my short list. When I saw the ones that you had while I was down, I was floored by the animal, because at the time my carpet, my coastal female, she was maybe 4.5 foot, just starting to put some, well, starting to put some size on and whatnot. And it was kind of a fun, bigger snake, you know what I mean? Because it was much more active and that kind of thing. And then I got to see your roughie, and that snake blew my mind, because I have zero desire to keep hots. Like, first of all, they're not legal here, but I got too much to risk to play with.
Me too.
I've been bit enough times to know that I'm not good enough to not get bit, right?
Me too.
And so, but the allure of the keeled scales on a rattlesnake, looks super cool. And when you can get effectively a carpet python sized and bodied and headed snake with keeled scales and those gray marble eyes, I was
non-venomous.
Yeah, I'm like, sign me up. I'll take it. Absolutely.
I've got a female that's gravid right now. I just ultrasounded her yesterday. She's got eggs in her. So
I told you to put me on that list. I don't know how I'm going to afford it, but I got it. I have to have one or two.
Not very many clutches of rough scales drop every year. I think.
Well, when you had told me when I was there that there was only like 3 or 4 breeding females in the country or something, right?
At the time when you were there, I think there were just maybe a few people that ever produced them in the States. Quite a few people produced them in Australia. But like this year, I know there's only been one clutch that's been hatched that I know about.
Yeah.
So, just a handful. That'll change here in the next few years, because they're not that difficult to breed. More people have them, get them grown up and stuff like that. But you're right. They are such a cool species.
Yeah, that's one I definitely need to add. I'm adding a couple just like fun separate species aside from the ball pythons run this room. That's the whole idea. That's what it takes to operate it, Sure. I do have some pairings of some other stuff I want to do, just kind of like side projects. Like I have the paradumerals. I'm not sure. She's got 35 millimeter follicles now, but I know in boas that's not much because they get huge, So and she's still eating. I'm not feeding her a ton, but it's been 4 months. So I figured I'd feed her. It's like
sure.
And so I hope to have a litter of dumerals. I think that would be super cool to just open the drawer one day and have 15 or 20, 15 dumerals in there. That's gonna be awesome.
That would be cool.
I have a proven breeder, call albino, Colombian boa coming, female.
Oh, nice.
I had the male that looked. I literally same genes in a male, albino head Henry, Motley, something or other. But I had a male, and I didn't have access to a breeder female, so I sold him and got this proven breeder from Chase Baker down your way.
Yeah, no, Chase Willow.
Yeah, and so it's Chase's albino or Chase's boa. So I got her coming so I can have a separate litter of albinos and snows and moon glows and that. I got to find a male for it at some point. I've got the pair of now documented coastal carpets. This girl's going to be a while before she's ready, but I've got another male that I picked up from Travis that has lineage back, I think, through the Madame Blueberry line or whatever, how it all works. But the Roughies is one that I definitely want one or two of. And I have, last year I put a deposit on a blacktail Crebo.
Oh, you did?
I did, with John Michaels. I want one so bad. I probably will end up with two. I don't know if I'll ever breed them, but I'll just try them anyway.
Yeah, you are branching out.
There's something about the Crebo. I like the Eastern Indigos and that. It's cool to watch them, but the blacktail Crebo in John's clean line, where it's just that sand colored head, and it looks like it has eye makeup on, like they have mascara on. That animal. The thing that's exciting to me is it's as close as I can get to a king without dying.
Right.
They've got the same head structure. They don't get quite as long, but I mean, they're still substantial size when they're full grown. They got the big, heavy scales on the heads. They got the same look in the eyes. And a lot of guys have told me that their mannerisms are very similar to kings.
Really?
But they're non-venomous, obviously. So I actually talked to I can't remember who I talked to, but somebody had mentioned that they use, a lot of times keepers will use blacktail or yellowtail, either one, Crebos, to learn to work with kings before you start working with kings that can kill you, because they have a very similar attitude.
That's interesting.
And you get into an 8-9 foot Crebo, you're still dealing with a fairly sizable animal, and you can obviously can carry that over into king cobras and that.
Yeah, it's just not going to kill you.
Yeah, and so I'm like, hell yeah, I want one. I mean, it's the largest colubrid on Earth. Like,
when are you supposed to get that?
Don't know yet. I got a message from John the other day because I checked in with him. He's waiting for the clutches to start falling, but I mean, I'm on the list, so that'll be cool. I'm super excited for the Crebo. That one's going to be fun.
That'll be cool.
Yeah. I got to get another. I'm going to have to probably, I mean, at some point I'll need another one of these 66.5 drawers, because
I was going to say
it should be huge, but I'm going to need a bigger room. So no, I do want some different variety, you know what I mean? And yeah. I think it would be good if I ever started doing shows regularly. I think it would be nice to have some variety on the table. It's going to be the majority ball pythons, but if I have, a half dozen carpet pythons there and a dozen numerals boas and 3 or 4 Crebos and whatever, like, I just think it makes the whole brand and everything a little bit better too.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I started to do Borneo short tails.
Yeah.
They're a cool snake. I love working with them, but yeah, get a little variety. And I'll tell you, anytime I bring green trees, to a show, man, you talk about just moth to the flame, draws a lot of people over to the table. So
do you vend Arlington?
I do vend. I started to vend pretty heavily right before COVID.
Yeah.
And most of the shows were, local to the state, either Texas, Louisiana, or Oklahoma. And I have vended Arlington and ARBC, but I found that the ball pythons that I produce, are mostly lower level, mid-level stuff, the pies, the blue-eyed Lucies, Candino, entry clown stuff. It just doesn't do well there. I'm much better off vending a smaller show where I don't have to compete, with Will Banks selling blue-eyed Lucies at half of what I can sell them at. So
yeah, of course.
And I don't have to vend to sell green trees. Those things they sell before they come out of the egg most of the time.
Yeah.
So when I do vend, it's usually smaller venues.
Well, you guys have you have that big herb circuit now too, Sean Gray stuff.
Oh my God, it's turned into a massive production. In fact, the Herbst Conroe show, which I did vend literally right before COVID, a couple of months. Now to get in there, they've got a waiting list 30 breeders deep.
Wow, that's awesome.
30 breeders deep. So I don't know if I'll ever vend that show again. If you ever give up your table, you're never getting it back.
We were supposed to 2 weeks ago. We were supposed to be at Herbst KC.
Okay, I've heard that's a good show.
I was in Kansas City, and we've got family down there, and I was supposed to meet up with Josh too, but he finally went in to get the hernia fixed after he got kicked by the cow a year and a half ago or whatever, and come to find out he had 5 of them. Like, that cowboy mentality, man. Like, he's got work to do, so I'll just grin and bear it, right? Like, Jesus Christ, man. But I got down there, so I shipped what I have left and my scaleless to Josh, and he said we could put him on his table at KC, and I was like, all right, sweet, and we'll hang out with him for a while, whatever. And I get down there, and I start, like, we're trying to coordinate with the family what we're going to do, and I can't find the show dates, times, locations, none of it. And I went to the Herbst page, and it said that it was advertising for the one in, like, August or whatever. It said the March show is canceled due to COVID. I'm like, what the hell? Like, when? So I shoot Sean Gray a message. I was like, hey, I just want to make sure this is true. Like, I'm down here. I got stuff for the show and whatnot. He's like, yeah, that show's been canceled for months.
So what happened to your snakes?
They're still at Josh's house.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But somehow I didn't do enough research, and Josh he's a busy dude. I get it and whatnot. And we just completely whiffed on the fact that Herbst KC's been canceled since, like, February.
Well, the Arlington show was canceled, and a lot of people didn't know it had been canceled.
Yeah.
It
got pushed back, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to be in February, I think. February.
But now, I mean,
now you guys
are just freaking hooting and hollering, and it's free for all now, right?
It's 100% wide open, no mask needed,
Yeah, unless you go to Austin, then you get to deal with all the liberals down there bitching about it. I mean, what do I know? I follow an entertainment company that's based in Austin, and I watch a lot of their YouTube videos and listen to their podcasts and stuff like that. And they don't even try to hide it. I mean, they are far on the other side of this discussion than you and I are. And it's sometimes listening to them bitch about Governor Abbott just drives me insane. Like, they
hate him.
Oh, I can't. And they're like, just wear your fucking mask. What's wrong with you? We can get back to normal. I'm like, you just don't understand logic, do you? Like,
they're like flatten the curve. Flatten the curve.
Oh my God, right? Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be 6 weeks and we'll be done with this. Right? No,
and then they still look back and say, if you would have just worn your mask 18 months ago, none of this would have happened.
We proved that not to be true with California.
Yeah, and New York.
California was the first state to lock down and had the highest compliance of mask wearing in any part of the country. And their numbers, their ranking in the overall country for cases or case rate and death per capita is interchangeable with Florida, that's been wide open since September.
Yeah.
That should stop the discussion right there, you would think.
You would think.
But it's LA County.
And think about what Florida has the worst case scenario. They've got spring breakers and old people.
And oddly enough, their case rate amongst people over 60 is lower than it is in California. And they have dramatically more of them. That's insane.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy. But no, so Josh told me that he would just hold on to him. I mean, I kind of feel bad because he's feeding them and whatnot, but he said he would just hang on to him and take him to Arlington. So they're going to be there next weekend. So and then I'm hoping it all sells and then I don't have to pay to ship them back, but I'll get it back at some point. So,
very good.
Well, we're actually right at that 90-minute mark. I'm kind of surprised that
that's what we talked about.
Actually got there.
That's what we talked about. That was our goal.
Yeah. Let me run down real quick through these comments, make sure I didn't miss nothing.
How have you been watching them all this time?
Yeah, I've seen a couple. A lot of times they are talking to each other, not necessarily to me. So this guy asked for you. So could the melanism dominate over blue and the male be homozygous for the melanism? I'm not sure, but I guess between like the sickness and the blue.
Yeah. They've been breeding green trees for a long time, and it just doesn't work homozygous. That just isn't how genetics work in the green trees. It's more of a polygenic. That's how traits. Yeah, that's how traits are established and bred for. Kind of like striping in coastal carpets.
Yeah.
If you want to produce striped carpet pythons, then you want to both parents to be striped, and it's kind of the same way in green trees. But there's so many different ways to get blue in green trees. There can be genetic blue, there can be hormonal blue, and then there can be just non-genetic blue. You just happen to have a super high blue animal, but it doesn't transfer that genetic trait into the offspring.
Yeah, and I've seen some others that they get like crazy high amounts of white sides in that look super cool. And
yeah,
some of the colors that you get, and like I came up with that sprinkles or confetti idea. I mean, that's just kind of what the cygnus looks like. It fascinates me that that's even feasible in nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't think it would necessarily, you wouldn't see it in nature because it's just been, again, like we talked about it, like a lot of, again, getting back to carpets, you wouldn't see nearly the high yellow carpets in nature that you see in, captivity, because they've been selectively bred for that high, bright, yellow.
Well, that's true with ball pythons. I mean, the combinations that we're making are all feasible in nature, but it's such an improbability and statistically that it would happen. I'll tell you, as I started to learn the genetics of ball pythons and understood the naming scheme is horrendous. We all know that the homozygous heterozygous thing is completely wrong in the way we use it, and super forms are not. That's not how it works. And like
codominant is not a
exactly term. We all just need to accept that Corey Woods has been correct all along, and we need to just get with the picture. But anyway, but as I started to learn and understand, I'm so baffled by one specific gene, because if you think about it, all of the genes that make really brightly colored ball pythons typically take multiple copies of a gene to do it. And the single forms are all variations of browns, tans, blacks, brown colored stuff, right? You talk about your bells and that. A white snake would never survive in the wild, but it takes two of something that looks normal-ish to make it.
Right.
This ultramel behind me, same thing. The normals, it takes two of them, right? The ultramel would never stand a chance. A pied would never stand a chance, especially a high white one, right? The one that does not make sense and how it exists at all is banana.
Right.
Because banana is a single gene that would never survive in the wild.
You wouldn't think.
How did that happen?
You wonder. I mean, I have no idea how it works in Ghana, Africa. If you go out and you pull up 1,000 ball python, termite nests, how many times are you going to find a banana?
Yeah.
I mean,
no wonder they were $60,000 or whatever when they were making them originally.
Yeah.
That one still, I understand. I can understand most of the other genes. I get how that exists in nature. The banana makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah. The ball python genetics, it's one of the reasons that I love working with them now ever as much as I did, when I got into them 20 years ago. When I got into them, you have to remember, a pastel was a big deal.
Yeah.
My first breeder male that I, spent some think I paid $2,000, was a hatchling pastel. At the time, you had yellow belly, spider, pastel, albino.
Pinstripe, right?
No, not pinstripe hasn't even been, when I got into it, pinstripe hadn't even been, discovered or released yet. A couple of years after I got into them and I bought a pinstripe from Brian Barczyk back in the day. That was the most money I ever spent on a snake.
Was a pinstripe? How funny!
It was a pinstripe, baby pinstripe male. But
Brian told that story. Brian told that story of how he got the pinstripe started, and I mean, I don't know the number, but I know that he made a killing on that project.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The money back then was absurd.
Money back then was crazy.
Just stupid.
Yeah, stupid fun though. Stupid, yeah. Like you go to Daytona back in 2000, 2002, and it was just crazy.
I mean, it was like being a drug dealer.
It was like being a
kingpin.
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of cash I've never seen anything like it. Discovery Channel needs to do a documentary on the founding fathers of ball pythons, and I'll bet you it looks like an episode of Narco. I bet you're right.
Like people stabbing each other in the back for a spider that's worth $50,000, and like just stacks of hundreds for a box of snakes from Africa, and like,
I mean, just absolutely crazy. It was.
Well, I mean,
I wasn't a big part of it. I was very on the outside, just a newcomer kind of at the time. But just to be able to see what I saw it was pretty cool, pretty unique.
Tom Crutchfield was on that episode of Locked Up Abroad.
I heard about that. I didn't see the episode, but
that I actually stumbled into it. But it's the same idea. I mean, bringing freaking cobras and shit onto the airline in a carry-on. Like, yeah. What a weird time that was. We do have a couple here. I love this statement. A mask is like keeping mosquitoes out with a chain link fence.
What if you put on? Well, what about two masks?
Well, you'd have to get the chain link fence with those little plastic inserts.
There you go.
That stops them, right? Where'd he go? Ernie wants to know what your favorite Disturbed song is.
Oh man, Down with the Sickness, of course.
Did I say Ernie? I don't know what I said. His name's Herbert. I don't know if I said Ernie or not. I don't know why I would have.
It's Down with the Sickness.
Yeah, I mean, it's fitting in multiple ways, but I think it's also, it's the most popular, obviously. Were you saddened by the passing of DMX? Was that impactful on your life? Not
really, no.
No.
Didn't lose.
That was more my era, I guess, wasn't it?
Didn't lose any sleep over it.
Yeah. How about this one? What do you think is going to happen to the ball python hobby once COVID is in the past and everyone is back to work without the time to maintain their snakes and such? And I'll add to this, and when the stimmies stop coming in.
Well, I'll answer that in a couple different parts. First of all, I don't think the stimmies are ever going to end. I think people have gotten used to it.
Not in this administration.
And I think there's going to be 2 stimmies a year from here on out. Oh. Secondly, for 20 years, I've worried that the ball python market was going to dry up and be saturated. For 20 years, it's never happened, even before COVID, long before COVID. Every single thing I've produced, I've sold. It may take a month, it may take a year, it may take 18 months, but everything I've ever produced, and I'm talking about thousands and thousands of ball pythons, is always eventually sold. And the third thing I'll say is that I've got a lot of friends that are vets, exotic vets, and just regular vets. And by far, the reptile pet market is blowing the roof off of every cat. People don't want cats and dogs and gerbils anymore. Reptiles is where it's at. It's growing on a huge curve. And it makes sense. I mean, millennials want something they can put in a box and, forget about it for a week if they want to. Or
I hate being classified with that group of people.
Take the good with the bad.
It pisses me off though, because it comes with a stigma, and I don't fit that mold at all, other than the date I was born.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a good or bad. It is what it is. But your generation are the ones that are buying all the reptiles.
Yeah, for sure.
Not mine.
I get his point from the sense of people aren't going to be at home 24/7 anymore when life gets back to normal. But with that as the exception, I mean, you have been through in the hobby. You've been through the recession of 08 and 09, where the stock market and the economy literally halved. We're not even close. We were nowhere close to halving when COVID hit in February.
It never touched the snake market. It was it was totally disconnected.
It's weird that things like that happen. That there's parts of economies of scale that don't participate, I guess is the way to put it. When 08 and 09 happened, I was just graduating high school, and I remember in my dad's field that his clients, we're talking about people with multi-million-dollar airplanes in their business or in their personal fleet or whatever, and they were buying new jets and stuff like that, and they were buying houses and whatnot. And I talked to him. He's like, I just choose not to participate. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where this doesn't affect me. In fact, this is where I make my money, because now I can come in and buy stuff on pennies on the dollar that in 3 years, when the world comes back to normal, because it always will, it's going to be worth 4x what I paid for it.
Well, the stock market doesn't affect the uber rich or the uber poor.
That's true.
I mean, it really doesn't. It doesn't matter if you're worth $3 billion or $1.5 billion. You're still uber rich, and you buy a yacht if you want to buy a yacht, or a mansion if you want to buy a mansion.
Yeah.
And same if you're uber poor. If you're struggling, just to feed your family every day, you're not saving money or putting money in the stock market. You don't care what it does.
Go figure. It's just that damn middle class just keeps getting separated out and stepped on, right? And the pie keeps growing. Hey, I don't disagree that with this current administration, we're probably going to get stimmies for the rest of next 3 years. I think it's absurd, but I mean, it's helping pay off my debt, so I guess I can't complain. I'm waiting to see how much Robinhood is going to give me for my wife's student loans. That's the one I want to know.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't agree with it.
Maybe she'll have some forgiveness.
Yep. Last time I checked, I can't go buy stuff with Monopoly money, but it sure seems to be that way. So I guess I'm along for the ride. I told my buddy at work, I was like, if they're going to pay off 30, 40, 50 grand of my wife's student loans and send me $4,000 every 6 months to help pay off debt at home, I guess I'll put up with it for 4 years.
I mean, yeah, take what you can get for sure.
That's right. Yeah. All right, man. I've taken up more than enough of your time, and it's running long on my day for sure. But I appreciate you hanging out and chatting with us.
It's past both our bedtimes.
Indeed. I mean, you said it, not me, that you're the same age as my dad, so you're definitely old. Like that's
and I'm in Central Time Zone, not Pacific.
I know. So speaking of which, I don't know when it is. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll have to look at my schedule when I sign off with everybody for tomorrow or for next week. But I worked out a time with Gavin from Balls to You in the UK.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'd love to be on. That'd be awesome. Like, well, I feel bad. I mean, my show starts at 8 p.m. my time. That's what, like next Thursday for you? And he said, it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he said, that works fine for me. I'm totally happy to do that. I'm like, you're insane. Why?
Dude, on our podcast, we've had people from Australia and Europe do the same thing.
Yeah.
They'll call it, yeah, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, man.
Well, and I had Chris Eaton on. He's on the East Coast. I mean, we started at 10 p.m. his time. It's like, geez. So, no, I appreciate you hanging out. And if the government ever pulls its head out of its ass and lets me travel again, I'm going to come back and see you and see what your collections become. And
all right, absolutely. You're welcome anytime. You know it.
Yep, and don't forget to scribble my name on your sticky note on that tub of Roughies. That's
We'll work something out. Maybe we'll do. Maybe we'll do some trade.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, for the handful of people that are still here, how do they get to you?
Facebook, Bill Stegall on Facebook, or Instagram, Phoenix Reptiles. Probably the easiest way.
Yeah, I'll have everything in the description as always. I appreciate it, boss.
Yeah, man. I enjoyed the couple hours.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put you aside here and sign off with that, and we'll be done for the night.
All right, get some rest, brother.
All right, man. All right, guys, there we go. The doctor himself. Super honored to have Bill in the chat. I haven't talked. We talk on and off online, but I haven't talked to him in a couple of years since I was down there, and we could sit and talk snakes for hours. I'm sure. I mean, that's the one thing I like about this show that I've come up with here is it's not all about what your clutches are this year and what you're planning. So it's kind of fun to joke around and talk politics a little bit and keep it lighthearted and talk about his background, especially as a doctor. I think that's super interesting, especially in this environment. So thanks for hanging out with us as always. Next week, I'm going to try to get a video out, like a regularly scheduled video this week. I've been really bad about it, but I got a lot on my plate right now and big things happening. But I'm up to 5 ovulations, I think, now. So we got clutches coming and clutch cutting here in about a month that we'll do live. So stay tuned for those. All the clutches will be cut live this year. And next week, next week is Robert from Husbandry Pro. I mean, if you've been watching Billy's stuff, you know what's going on, what we're talking about. I'm going to have him on, and we're going to ask him all the questions on what the program is, what makes it work, and how we can move forward with it. So I'm really excited about that. But I think that's going to do it for us. I am more than ready for bed, and I will see you guys next week with Robert from Husbandry Pro. See ya.